Thanks for joining us. Today is our second episode of Make It Monday, and today we are going to make a 2-color glitter ombre with water slide decals. The supplies you are going to need is 2 colors of glitter. I have this pretty fiery fuchsia and this frosty white. Need water slide decals. Today we're going to use this one for one side and this for the other. You will need your 2-part epoxy, parts A and B. Silicone bowl, mixing stirrer, measuring cups, a container for some water, rubber gloves for safety, and that's about it. For the water slide decals, if you are making your own, you will need water slide paper. This is the kind that I use, and there is a link to this underneath this video, and also a clear coat. This is the kind, one of the kind I use. It's a Krylon Color Max Indoor Outdoor non-yellowing. If you're using inkjet, I use inkjet for my water slide decals. They're you can use laser jet, but I don't have that technology, so what you get is what you get. So the first step is we are going to put our glitter on, and I use the epoxy method. So I am going to measure 5 mLs of part A epoxy. And I'm going to put that into my silicone bowl. And then equal parts, so I will need 5 milliliters of part B as well, which comes out much faster, as you can see. When I use epoxy for putting on glitter, I'm not so concerned about bubbles like I would be if I was putting on a middle layer or a top coat. So I stir it pretty good. When you mix 2 parts of epoxy, it does get really cloudy when you first mix it together. You know it's ready when it's not cloudy anymore. So you want to stir it until it's clear. And make sure to scrape the sides, get it all mixed in. And that looks pretty good. And I take a baby wipe and I simply clean off my stir so it is ready for the next time, and I set it aside. I'm going to turn on my turner here. Now for the epoxy method for glitter, I like to do a super thin layer. You do not want it chunky, you don't want it thick, you want it super thin. So I am just lightly coating the surface. Make sure you guys can see. Now this is a different brand of cup. I normally don't use the brands that have the like embossed emblem in them. I just don't like it, but one of my besties showed up here today with a blank cup and had it at my pool all day long. So I told her that we can't have that here, and so I'm going to take her cup and give it a facelift because we can't have blank cups in my house. It's like, come on, girls, you know better than that. I think maybe they bring me their blank cups just to aggravate me so they know that I'll make them a new one. So this is, I believe this is Ozark Trail from Walmart. I believe that's their logo. But it is getting glitter, so you might not really see it much when it's all said and done. Okay. I'm just going to let that turn for a second. I take off these gloves and turn off the fan, because don't ever do glitter with the fan on. I learned that the hard way. So when I do glitter, I do like to use file folders to catch my glitter because I like to put it back in. And I tend to always start with the lighter color first. So in this case, it's going to be white. And on this cup, it's going to be white at the top and the fuchsia at the bottom. And I'm going to pour it right out of the bag. So I'm going to slightly sprinkle. And I know I want the glitter on this to come down pretty much into the center line, so I'm going to kind of work it from there. This is a super pretty white. And you'll see as you cover in it, basically you don't want any shiny spots left. Now, when I ombre, I leave kind of a blank spot where I know I want these colors to mix. So in here, I want there to be a section where it literally ombres together and mixes together. So I'm not going to go all the way down. I'm going to leave it open a little bit. That looks pretty good. So I'm actually not going to put that glitter back in the bag like I normally would. On an ombre, I'm going to show you how I get a really good mix. I'm actually going to grab another measuring cup and I'm going to put this extra glitter into that cup. And you'll see why in a few minutes. I like the file folders because they have a natural folder and it just dumps in real easy. So now I got a little bit of this white glitter in here, and I'm just going to sit that off to the side. And I'm going to put my file folder back, and then I'm going to grab the fuchsia here. And I always start at the bottom. And I'm going to go up pretty far, but I'm going to leave a little bit of a space up there. I don't want to go all the way. I want some leftover epoxy open up there. Like I want that blank space in the middle. I'm gonna make sure that got a couple little bald spots on the bottom, and I want to make sure that's covered up. And there's a couple spots in here. I'm just going to make sure it's pushed down and even. Okay. Now, I'm going to take this glitter and I am going to put it back in the bag. So it seems like you're using a lot of glitter, but look, I mean, we did that whole bottom of that cup, and I mean, the bag's still pretty much full. Now I'm going to take just a little bit of this glitter, and I'm going to mix it in with this white. Because this is so dark, I'm not going to quite do equal parts. I'm going to do a little bit less than equal parts, and I'm going to mix it up real good. I kind of want to blend it. And make sure it's all blended together. Kind of want a medium between these two. Okay? I'm going to come here. I'm going to gently start dropping this in the middle here. Oh, I forgot to put my little guy in there to catch my. Oh well. And since this glitter's mixed, this goes in with my dump cup. What I call my dump cup? I got a dump cup that I put glitter. And I'm just lightly putting it in there. And I'm going to come back with a little bit more of that darker pink and soften that edge up. Right now I'm just putting this little mix on here in this section. As you can see, I'm barely dropping it. But you see how it's starting to come together? Just want a little bit at a time, little bit at a time. Little bit at a time. You can always add more, but it's really hard to take away. Okay, now I'm going to save some of this. Just scoop it back up. And I'm going to come back in. I'm actually thinking I'm going to pour a little of this in a cup. And a little bit more control of it. I don't need a lot. And then I want to soften up this edge. And I'm kind of high up, as you can see. I'm just softening that edge there with this darker color. I don't want a harsh line. I want it to blend. It's an ombre, which means it should gently transition from one color to the next. And these contrasting colors are hard because, you know, white is as light as you can get. And this fuchsia is pretty dark. around here. Might as well fix them while it spins around here. It's really about having patience to do the blend. It really is. It's not something you want to rush. You don't want to dump it on there. You want to be very soft-handed. And the further away you are, the kind of lighter the hit is going to be that you're dumping. These cups have a sharper like angle here, which I don't particularly love. That's why the kind I use have a smoother curve. So this one, I just gotta make sure that it's blended nice along that curve there. Alright, now I'm gonna come back with our mix again. Let's see if I have a little bit more in here in the mix. Okay. It's looking pretty good, but you can still kind of see a dark line there. So like this was like a 1/3 to 2/3 pink to white mix. I'm gonna take a little bit of that and just add a little bit of pink to it and get something that's not as dark as this, but a little bit darker than that. And I'm gonna go right in here to get that color transition. I want it to have a color transition, a good one. With a little lighter than what's above it. I mean, sorry, a little lighter than what's below it. I'm sorry, lighter than what's below it, darker than what's above it. Yeah, that's right. I'm getting myself all mixed up. And I'm trying to get this one, an angled piece there. Where that cut of the cup is. And then I'm going to take just a little bit of this, and I'm actually going to add a little bit of white to it to make one that's just a little bit lighter than that original 1/3, 2/3 mix we did. So I'm going to mostly white, and I'm only going to use a little bit of this, but I'm going to use it right at the top here in this kind of section here. doing this, you get super smooth transition. It's basically a gradient, and you just want it to fade from white all the way down to the fuchsia, and this is going to be so pretty. And it's done. That looks pretty good. Now I see a couple spots where I need just a little bit of the fuchsia at the bottom. And get all the coverage to darker color. So now normally I would paint the cup the color or close to the color I'm glittering. You get, it's easier to cover that way. You don't have white against a, a dark color glitter. You're going to see anytime you miss a spot. There we go. That is a smooth 2-color ombre. So I had 2 colors, but honestly we mixed pure white with a little bit of pink. Then we had like a 2/3 mix. Then we had like maybe more like a half and half mix, or a little bit more pink than white. And then we had the final one. So it's really 5 blends of color in there to get a smooth transition. So we're going to let this spin 4 or 5 hours, and then I'm going to put a flood coat on it and get it ready for our decals. So we'll be back. Okay, we are back, and we have let this turn. I honestly let it turn overnight because it was late and I went to bed. So now it is ready for an epoxy coat on top. We need a smooth coat of epoxy before we can put our water decals on. So we're going to mix up some epoxy and get this going. So I'm going to do a total of 20 mLs for this cup. Glitter tends to soak it in a little bit more, and I want to make sure it's a smooth flood coat. So I'm going to do 10 of each parts A and B. So I have my got my silicone bowl ready. And I put a little line here to kind of make it easier for you guys to see where I'm going for. That is part A. This is the thicker of the 2. And if you watch my first video, you'll see when I do my epoxy, I warm up part A. Part A is super thick, and I want it to be the same consistency as part B before I mix them together. So I'm going to warm this up real quick. And I like to do it by itself versus both together, because I feel like when I heat them up both together, it speeds up the curing process, and I don't want to do that. I do want to thicken this up, or thin this out, I'm sorry. It just mixes better with part B when I do it. There we go. So I like it nice and runny because part B is super runny. I just want it to be where it'll just fall off of my stir stick. And I'm going to come back here. I'm going to get me 10 mils of part B. See how easy part B pours in? It's so thin. Stir those together until they're clear. They get a little cloudy when you first mix them up. So don't freak out. I do stir this part slower to try to make sure I want the least amount of bubbles as possible. I'm going to use my torch to pop them on the cup, but always helps to start with less. And that's pretty good. Nice and thin, barely any bubbles. It's hard for you to see in the black bowl, but I'll wipe off my little stir and put it aside. Okay, so if you didn't watch my first video, you've never seen me do this, but the way I do my epoxy is I do a thin coat, I hit it with my torch, I flood coat it, hit it with my torch again, and I'm done. The first coat is just to prime the cup to make sure that there is epoxy on every section. And then when I flood it with what's left in the bowl, that gives it something to stick to. Now before, I did put a coat of clear. I forgot to mention that. After this dried this morning, I just sprayed a coat of clear coat on there. So I don't get a ton of glitter coming off. I don't want it to really move and blend into that white. There's still going to be some glitter moving no matter what I do, but I just did a quick clear coat to kind of help seal any loose pieces that were on the top. But when I have two colors like this, where I have a light and a dark, I always start with the light side first when I'm applying my epoxy. And I'm going to apply epoxy to this half of the cup first. Then I'm going to go down here and put epoxy into this side because I do use my hand and I don't want pink glitter getting on my hand and then me rub it into the white part. So I'm going to try to keep them as separated as possible. So I'm going to start over here and I'm just going to go halfway down. And I'm just doing a super thin coat. Like I said, I'm just priming the cup. I'm just looking for dry spots, making sure that I've got epoxy on all of the dry spots, all the way down to where the pink starts. And I think I hit most of them. So then I'm going to switch. And I'm going to come to the bottom. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. look at my hand. See all that pink glitter? I mean, it's not a ton, but had I just started mixing all around, that would have worked into that white at the top, and I want that to be not do that. So then I'm going to do the center, and I'm not okay if I have a little bit of pink on my hands because this is that area we spent all that time blending in, and it's alright. The little pink on my fingers gets in that section. I just work it in until I feel like I've got every part of the cup. It's got a nice thin coat on it. Now, I'm going to switch gloves. I'm going to get a new glove for this hand because it's all covered in pink glitter. And I am going to start, when I put this flood coat, back at the white side. And I do not want pink glitter mixed in that. So I'm going to switch my glove. So I have a clean one, and I don't have a ton of epoxy left in here. I honestly wish I would have made a little bit more, but we'll see if it's enough. Oh, you know what I forgot? Oh, I forgot to torch it. I'm going to torch between steps. Now you can't see many of the bubbles because it is glitter and textured, but I can see some here. So I'm just going to hit it real quick just to pop any of those underlying bubbles. Now I'm going to go back and add my little bit of flood. Scrape this container, try to get every little bit out. Okay. And I'm just going to kind of start smoothing it out a little bit. It's helping it do its thing. Okay, so honestly, I want a little bit more epoxy on there. So I'm going to just mix up a little bit more. It's not, I can see where it's just not quite thick enough covering that glitter, so I probably should have mixed a little bit more. I don't need a whole 10 of each. I probably will just do half of that and make another little batch of it. So I'm going to go 5. I'm just going to mix up another 10 ml, so I'm going to go 5 of each one. While it's still wet, you can add more epoxy. So if you're short, you know, you can still mix up some more and just add to it. But you can see, it's hard to see on camera, but you might be able to see kind of where that light's reflecting in the video. Like right in here, you can see how it doesn't look quite glassy. It looks a little rough. That reflection's rough. And that's because there's just not quite enough epoxy smoothing that glitter out. So I'm just going to add some more. It's not a big deal. Mix up some more. Add it in. And hopefully that's enough just to finish it off. If you still do have rough spots, after this glitter phase, you can sand this cup. And that's, I might end up having to sand before I put on decals. We'll see. Five of my part B here. And it was close. It's not too far off from having enough, but it's just a little bit short. I can really see it in the pink section. And I hate to sand cups. I'm not going to lie. I hate to sand cups. So if I can get that epoxy smooth on the first go round, I would much rather do that. If I have to just sand around this bottom edge and the top edge, I'm good with that. But sanding cups is not fun. So if your epoxy is smooth enough, you don't have to do that. Okay, so now, that was a little thick. There we go. Let that turn there. I got some pink glitter on my gloves, so I'm going to put a new one on before I touch that white section. Told you I go through a lot of gloves. But I don't like to mix, I don't want to mix the colors together. I'm just going to help it smooth out a little bit here. And that's going to be enough. This amount. I think this amount of epoxy is really perfect. It's all smoothed out, real nice. And now I'm going to hit it with my torch. Pop any of these bubbles here. And you can see it. It's really hard for you guys to see it on screen, but when you're doing this, you'll see all these little micro bubbles, and when you hit it with this flame, they just pop like magic. And there we go. So we're going to have to let this cure about 8 hours or so before we can add on our water slide decals. So I just let it turn, go about my business, and we'll come back. Hey everyone. Okay, we are back, and we have our tumbler smooth and dry, and it's time to put on our decals. So this cup is going to get this cute little lady here and some words on the opposite side. So this is called water slide paper. So the kind I buy, you print it on an inkjet printer at your house, and then you spray it with a clear coat and you let it dry. And if you've ever gotten a tattoo, it's very similar to that kind of process, or a temporary tattoo, like we give our kids and they get out of the machines. So you're going to take, I've got just some lukewarm water, close to room temperature, and I'm going to drop it in there. Now it curls up when I first put it in the water. I like to open it up and flatten it out a bit. And we're going to let it sit. It doesn't take long. I don't know, 20, 30 seconds maybe. And basically what the water is doing is loosening the film that you've created with the print and the clear coat. So the water is going to loosen that film from the backing. And when this comes off of here, it will be like a clear, completely clear decal. So whatever's behind our cup, you'll see it through. So I'm going to put a little bit of water here. So when I do put it on, it'll kind of help it slide a little bit. So I just dampen the surface. And when it's in your water, if you'll just kind of touch it, you'll see it starts to slide off the paper. See how it's moving off the paper? That's what you want to do. It's why it's called water slide paper. So I put it on my piece, wherever I'm putting it, and I get one end kind of started, and then I slide it off the paper. Slide the paper out from underneath it. Okay, so at this point, I've got a decal on my cup. I gotta turn this way so it doesn't loosen my cup up because it won't stay on there. So there you go. So see it? So there is kind of water behind it, and it needs to be smoothed out a bit. So I take a dampened baby wipe and I just start smoothing out. And as you do this, you can barely see the edge of this water slide where it is. But when you put epoxy over that, it disappears. So, a lot of times I use vinyl and different things on cups, but you have to cut that, you have to weed it. This gives you the option to put a full color decal and not have to worry about being white around there, because you can see right here, you can kind of see a little bit of that glitter showing through. It's super cool. I love water slide. Now where you'll run into problems with water slide is the sealer that you're using to clear coat them. When I started, I didn't have the right sealer, and my decals would fall apart in the water. When I was trying to smooth them, they would stretch out. There's a brand I use it called, it's Rust-Oleum, it's Krylon Triple Thick. So this Triple Thick Clear Gaze, I use this one, or I use this one, Color Max Clear Indoor Outdoor Acrylic. And I'll have links to these as well. And you want a couple good coats on it and let it dry before you try to stick it on. So that's side one of my cup. So I'm just going to rotate this little sweetheart here so I can get to the back side where I'm going to put the other text. I'm going to dampen that a little bit. I'm going to take my little thing, drop it in there. I hate that it rolls up, but it does. So my OCD tells me it needs to be flat. So I flatten it out in the water and let it sit there a few seconds. I love water slide. And even if you're not doing epoxy and you want to decorate cups or wood or anything, you can use this water slide on wood, metal, glass, even coffee mugs. You can put it in there and you can bake it in the oven and it'll become permanent on things like coffee mugs and plates. So look how quick that is, and it's just already sliding off. And you want to let it do its thing. You want to let it slide. That's the whole point. So I just tack down the top or side or wherever. I just pick what I'm going to do. And I slide the paper out. And since I put some water on there, I mean, I can move this. See how I can move it? I'm going to move it to make sure that my letters are straight and they're where I want them to be. Oh, this is super, super cute. And then normally I start kind of in the middle, and I just smooth the middle down and then push to the outside. And you'll see the water come out from underneath it as you're pushing it. And you do want to make sure all that water's out from underneath it. Oop, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to bump the camera there, guys. Always use a damp cloth of some sort, whether it's sometimes I use these little makeup swab things. Most of the time I use a baby wipe, but make sure if you don't use something damp, your fingers, like whatever you're using, will stick to it and it can rip your decal. So I mean, there's barely any water on here, but it's just enough to slide over the surface. Make sure I get all my little air bubbles out and all my water out. This is a really popular cup. I sell lots of these. But this design is exclusively mine. You won't find this one out there anywhere else. I do all my own illustration and Photoshop work. But this decal will be part of the kit for this cup. And she's super cute. Okay, so I'm gonna let this dry a couple hours. You don't want to rush this step. I mean, you can hit it with a heat gun, you can force it to dry faster. It's just best to let it air dry, let it do its thing before I put the next coat of epoxy on it. We won't have to clear coat or anything like that, but you do want to make sure this is dry, all the moisture's gone before we throw epoxy on there. So we're gonna be patient and we're gonna let it dry a few hours, and then we'll come back and we will put the final coat of epoxy on this cup and we will be all done. See you soon. Okay, we are back and our water slide is completely dry. And so our final step, we're gonna add our last coat of epoxy to our tumbler. Now I have about 5 other tumblers that I need to epoxy right after this. So I'm actually going to make a much bigger batch than I normally do. But it's same process. You can make more if you're doing multiple turners and multiple cups. You do not have to do them one at a time. Some people choose to. Me, I'm a multitasker. So I got my measuring cup. I'm actually going to do 2 full parts of A. What I do normally when I have, I try to organize my work. So I am working in batches. So, you know, like I did 5 water slides all at the same time. Then I'll do 5 epoxies all at the same time. If I'm painting, I try to paint them in groups. That way it's just, I'm making one kind of mess at a time. And then I have some really cool silicone molds. And I can put some links to those too, that if you have extra epoxy, you can dump them in to make keychains, jewelry, all kinds of stuff you can make with your extra epoxy. So I don't like to waste. So if you watch my other videos, you know that I like to warm up my part A of epoxy. So I like to warm that up before I mix the B and get it to a thinner consistency. And I just mix it around until it gets, you'll feel it with your, whatever your turning utensil is. I prefer metal, but you'll feel the epoxy start to thin out. It almost has the consistency of clear glue when you first put it in there, and then after you warm it up. I guess the comparison would be when you take pancake syrup out of the fridge. Oh, it's thick, but then once it warms up on your pancakes, it's good and runny. Yeah, that's kind of what I want it to be. I want it to be good and runny. Still a little thick. When you're mixing two things together, if they're the same consistency, they will just mix better. Everyone does their epoxy different. You just got to play around and find out what works for you, where you live, what kind of area you're working in, humidity, temperature, all that plays a part. There we go. So now I have my part A, and like you can see, it's super thin. It just runs off my thing. So I'm going to grab my part B and add in 2 cups of this. And I had filled that on all the way to the top. Remember, equal parts, so whether you're making a little or whether you're making a lot, it's equal parts. So I better scrape it out, make sure I get it all. There we go. When you first put it together, it gets cloudy. Don't freak out. It's supposed to happen. The more you stir it, you'll see it becomes clear like water. That's what you want. And see how thin it is? I like my epoxy thin when I work with it. I just scrape all the sides. Make sure it's clear as water. And that's it. Like I said, this is a big batch because I'm going to make some other cups as soon as I'm done recording this segment here. So I do have another measuring cup that I've marked. I'm going to use about 15 mLs on this. And then I'm going to set my bowl aside for my other cups. Okay, so as I've shown you before, I like to start with a super thin layer of epoxy. I like to prime my cup, is what I call it. This is why you have to wait for your water slide to dry, because if you try to rub a wet water slide like this with epoxy over top of it, it's going to be a hot mess. So I'm just feeling for any dry spots. I want you to see. I filled up to that purple line. Can you see it? That's how much I used to prime it. That's it. That's all I used. So I mean, I'm putting a super thin layer on. but it has completely covered this cup. And then I take and I do what I call a flood coat. And I like to do a thin stream. Up and down. I do make sure to kind of drop a little bit the bottom of the cup. And what I didn't do is normally I would hit that first clear coat, that like primer coat with my little torch, and I forgot. But it's alright. This is a glitter cup. You won't see many bubbles. And then I just help it along here and smooth it out. Epoxy's self-leveling, so it will do its thing. That's the whole reason it's on a turner. It's going to level itself out. As long as you have enough on here for it to do its thing, it will. And I'm going to let that turn there. Just make sure I'm not missing any spots or nothing looks off. And I do see some air bubbles in there, but we're going to take care of those. We're going to get rid of them. So I have my handy dandy torch, and this thing's very inexpensive, but it is so worth it if you're going to do these cups. See, there's bubbles all in there. I can see them where the light shines, so I'm going to hit them with my torch. And they are literally just going to pop. Making sure I didn't miss any. It's hard to see with the camera when the bubbles pop, but pretty much they're gone. We're getting them there. And I will let this turn about 10 minutes, and I'll come back and check on it and just make sure I don't see any additional bubbles I missed the first time. Let the epoxy settle so I know where it's going to be, and then if I by chance I missed a spot or I have something weird going on, it's still wet enough and pliable for me to manipulate it, but right now it looks pretty darn good. So we're gonna let this spin. I'll probably let it spin overnight, at least 8 hours. I'll let it dry before I take it off my turner, and we'll be back with a finished cup tomorrow. Hey everyone, welcome back. Our cup is finished. I've taken